So now let's get back to our core, which is now we have done yesterday the susceptibility assessment, right? And we have learned two approaches, two statistical based model or probabilistic based model. One is frequency ratio model, another one is logistic regression model. Okay? So SPSS, I asked you all to install in your laptop and bring your laptop. Okay, that is better. So that you can process on your own. I can give you the data. You can play around with the data, the complete data set. Okay. Good. So now the next is we would like to learn the vulnerability assessment. Okay. Susceptibility, vulnerability, hazard, and risk. You remember the equations. Risk is the function of hazard and vulnerability. And if you are doing actually the amount, quantification of the, okay, very good. You all are becoming expert now. Now, what we learned this morning is the concept. What we have learned so far, very superficially we have learned about, I have mentioned the vulnerability assessment. But then the different ways of calculating the vulnerability assessment we'll learn today. Okay? Then the relationship between the risk and vulnerability, I think this also I have already mentioned to you, isn't it? Risk is vulnerability, function of vulnerability and hazard, correct? Then coping capacity and resilience. This is very important. Although it sounds that similar, but they are not. Okay? Coping capacity and resilience. Okay? So once you understand this, then you understand what are the type of data that you need, especially for you to do the vulnerability assessment. Okay? Again, I am reiterating here that the vulnerability assessment doesn't need you to have any kind of prior susceptibility or hazard assessment. It's a separate, standalone assessment. As long as you have the data for socioeconomic parameters. Okay? Good? Now, let's look at this. As I have mentioned, so vulnerability assessment is a multi-dimensional approach. Okay? And there are multiple definitions also. The way an economist look at actually the vulnerability is totally different than what a geospatial engineer would look at it. Or maybe a civil engineer would look at it. Right? For civil engineering, it's more about the structural analysis and all those things, right? For an economist, it's more about money, 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 right? So from different perspective, that's how they have conglomerated all these definitions, and this is what actually we are going to learn. Nevertheless, we must learn all the approaches. Okay? So there are multiple definitions, and they have different conceptual framework. So if you look at actually from a simple vulnerability-based assessment, which is which is just the factor of risk. Like in many papers, old papers, when the definition was not well established, we used to just do a simple risk assessment based on the vulnerability, just element of risk. But now once the definition has expanded, right, and the understanding has become more common, that's how we have gone beyond it. See, another definition comes vulnerability as the likelihood to experience. That means human-centered. That means where the expert knowledge comes in. Okay? Then vulnerability as a dualistic approach of susceptibility and coping capacity. Therefore, the coping capacity comes in. This is where the hardcore, the disaster guys are coming in. Okay? You understand everything. Then, next is vulnerability as a multiple structure, susceptibility, coping capacity, exposure and adaptive capacity. That means you see it's expanding. Once it is expanding, obviously you need more and more data. But it's not easy. Sometimes all this data, even simple data also to capture, it's very hard. For example, if I ask for house income, I don't think you have any kind of data in India that you can get it. You don't have. You wouldn't have even actually the per GDP of a particular jilla or district, right? You don't have. So what you need to do, you have to take actually for the whole state, and then based on the population, if you have the population of the district, then you try to like do the ratioing and all that. But that's a different approach. That's not 100% Correct. In Australia, we have the household income data. Okay? And we also have like the pricing of the house as well. That is the public domain. Okay, let's say one house, the transaction of the house, what has happened in the last 100 years or 40 years, 50 years, you can find everything. How the price of that particular house or the land has gone up or gone down over a period of time. And those are the data that you need actually to do the detailed assessment. Okay, so it's all about data. The more data you have, the more detailed assessment you can do. Otherwise, you just have to do some basic kind of assessment. Okay? The last one is multidimensional vulnerability encompassing physical, social, economic. Okay, here economic was not there. Economic, environmental, and institutional features. Okay, so you see, from a simple vulnerability assessment, you are now widely expanding the definition of the vulnerability based on the multi-dimensional approach, multi-stakeholder approaches. Okay. Now, let's define it. Let's learn how to define it. The degree of loss to a given element at risk, that is what you call the degree of loss, okay, to a given element at risk or a set of elements at risk resulting from the occurrence of a natural phenomenon with a given magnitude. Already I have mentioned this earlier. And expressed on a scale from 0 to 1. Okay? 0 is degree of loss that is expected to have coming from an impending natural hazard at a given time and space. Okay? So that is what the definition given by UNDRO, the United Nations Organizations, in 1991. Okay? Now, another definition also says that exposure to risk and an inability to avoid or observe potential harm. That means you are exposed to the risk, and your ability or inability to avoid or to adapt to a potential harm. So you see, from 1991, now the definition has been improved, okay, in 2003. In this context, this particular gentleman, he expanded and brought in three different types of vulnerability categories. One is physical vulnerability, that means vulnerability of the physical environment. Social vulnerability by people and their social and economic and political systems. And human vulnerability is the combination of both. Okay? It's very depends. It depends what you want to do, but then we would follow actually one particular approach when we want to do our vulnerability assessment. Okay? Now, when you talk about a person, a group of people, or a community, right? And to define their capacity or to anticipate for an impending hazard that is coming, how to cope with it, right? That means how prepared you are, right? The knowledge is also plays an important role. That means, let's say there is a cyclone coming, so that means by and large, if the community is aware of the cyclone, okay, that the wind speed goes up, this and that, obviously there are generation-wise, there's some kind of traditional knowledge that has been passing around. Obviously, those are also very, very crucial as well. The traditional knowledge, you cannot simply throw it out, because this comes from the human experience over generations. Okay. Now, all these conditions would be determined by physical, social, economic, and environmental factors. That means your resilience capacity and your coping capacity would be depending on this. Okay? Understand? Yes. Good. Now, so if you want to mathematically define it, vulnerability becomes exposure multiplied by resistance multiplied by resilience. Okay? Exposure is the risk of property and populations. Okay, now imagine if we have prepared actually a hazard map. Okay? Now we just simply drag the element at risk on top of it. That is also some sort of risk assessment, because you are still defining the degree of expected risk okay, coming from a particular hazard. Okay, but that is just actually exposure overlaying based assessment. There is no mathematical based assessment that is being done. But in this case, obviously, there is a very detailed assessment that normally they follow. What is resistance here? Resistance is the measure taken to prevent, avoid, or reduce loss. See the difference? Pay attention to it. Resistance says measures taken to prevent, avoid, or reduce loss. Okay? That means it's pre-disaster conditions. Already you have this information with you. Okay? Whereas the resilience is ability to recover prior state or achieve desired post-disaster state. How quickly that you could bounce back. If a disaster is happening, okay, once I'll show you some nice graphs that you will understand. Once a disaster hits, okay, now obviously your resilience at that particular time drops, right? But then from that point, how quickly you can be able to bounce back to bring you to the normality. That is what you call is resilience.
Sir,
Clear?
here resistance means sensitivity. Which things are sensitive to that hazard?
No, we'll understand. Don't worry. Go with the slow pace. Okay? You'll understand. Once I show you the data, then you will understand. Okay? Now everyone is with me? Yes, sir. Good. Now, this we have already discussed about it. I'm not going through it. Okay? This graph, remember risk assessment? This is where the vulnerability assessment comes in. And also I have explained to you this graph, these equations, right? Risk is temporal probability multiplied by degree of loss to element at risk and quantification of element at risk. That means the dollar value. Okay? Now, let's look at the entire perception of the vulnerability. I mentioned there are 4 types, right? So you have economic, you have physical, you have environmental, and you have social. And they are all multi-dimensional. Okay, because there are certain aspects actually common anyway, isn't it? So when you are talking about economy, there is also some social stuff will be there as well. The social structure, everything also depending on the economic conditions as well, right? Also, it depends on the physical. Physical means if someone has a very wealthy house, or let's say highly resilient structure, that means the economy is very high, isn't it? So they're all. That is why these graphs are all. These spheres are all being. You see, there are some common things here. So vulnerability is multidimensional, as I mentioned, and it's dynamic because it changes. So it doesn't stay there forever. So therefore, when you collect the data based on the land use, land cover, or maybe your socio-economic data, or maybe your population data, you must make sure that that is latest. You are not using an assessment based on 90s data. India has changed, India has moved, right? You go to the village now, many villages you don't find actually the traditional mud houses now, right? A lot of actually concrete structures now, correct? So you need the accurate data to represent this and to do the correct assessment as well. And also it is scale dependent. Okay, that means what? If you have very detailed data, you can do household based assessment, okay, to a community based assessment, right? But depending on what quality of data that you have. So when you say household data, that means it's very high resolution data. We're talking about in terms of less than a meter spatial resolution or a meter spatial resolution, very high spatial resolution. One pixel size is about a meter, representing the ground surface. Okay? And this is also very site specific as well. Okay? Now, let's understand what are the data that we are talking about. Okay? So according to the United Nations report, living with risk, this is what actually they define. The risk is rooted in conditions of physical, social, economic, and environmental vulnerability. So this is what now they have adopted, that this is what it is. Okay, that means 4 types of vulnerability. Okay. Now, if you want to do the assessment, try to understand that what are these different types of vulnerabilities are. Social vulnerability is what? Age related. For example, if there is an earthquake happens, okay, 9 Richter scale, massive, okay. Now you have actually, there is an old age house, old age home, like in Australia, they are very popular, right? You know, India is also, sadly, it is also becoming popular as well. People are working, everyone is working now. No one has time now actually to take care of the old parents. So therefore, they have created actually a community that where they send actually their old parents, or if let's say one of the parent has passed on, there is one is there, and no family members are there to take care of. So they prefer to go there. In India, I don't think people prefer because it's a social taboo. But in foreign countries, in Western countries, they prefer to go there because it is convenient for them. Okay, and it's like a hotel. Someone is there taking care, the healthcare is there, everything is there. Obviously, so obviously they prefer that, and they don't have that social kind of structure like what that the Indian society has or the Asian society has, right? Because when the parents actually taking care of the children, there is a very genuine expectation is that once they grow old, they will be taken care of by the children. But sometimes it's hard. Right? People are busy or whatsoever the reason could be. So in that case, I was explaining that if there is a 9 Richter scale, and if that is the place where about 80 and above age group are there, so their ability actually to evacuate the place would be, I don't know. Now you see, so there is no end to it, depending on what kind of data that you have, and based on that you can categorize. Okay, so age related, percentage of young children, percentage of elderly people, and when you are estimating the risk also, this would be useful as well. Some society like Japan, they have a aging society. That means it's alarming situation. People, that means the birth rate is so low, I think 0 point something now. Okay, in years to come, so they see that in the future, their own, what do you call it? The gene, is going to lose out because, and why actually the birth rate is low? Because the society, this is one of the advanced countries, right? So the society has become highly competitive. So things are expensive. People are workaholic. No time. And if you have a baby, who is going to take care? Tokyo. Anyone has visited? No. You're a young guy. So expensive. One bed up apartment, which is called studio apartment, so expensive. And people are workaholic. So obviously, so these are the things that they couldn't balance, right? Thank God, Australia is one of the most relaxed and very balanced life. Okay, so work-life balance is wonderful. In India, I don't see that is also happening because people overly working here, and it kills you mentally as well, right? So now this sort of data is related. Income related, percentage of household living below poverty, then unemployment rate. This kind of data is very useful because here we do not give, we don't have the unemployment benefit. But if you go to UK, you go to Australia, every citizen is entitled for unemployment benefit. If you are 18 and above, and if you do not have a job, the government gives you money to live, right? And therefore the tax is very heavy. I pay 48% tax. So $1 I earn, 50 cents is going for the tax. There is no discussion about it. And in India how many people are paying tax? Only the working people, those who are there in the system, only there. Otherwise you see unorganized sectors, no one is paying tax. Imagine if at least about how many people would be working? Let's say about 1.6 billion people. If I would conservatively estimate, let's say around 60 million people. Okay? How much of tax? And how much actually the economy can grow? So we have the assumption that the government will do things for us, right? Who is government? The other day I was explaining, who is government? Government is you. And the government will bring what? Modi ji will bring some from Mars, is it? Where the money will come from? Okay, there are assets, there are resources, but highly competitive. You are doing trading, right? You look at actually the data, we traded 100 billion trading we did with US and all that. But there is China. There is also other countries. They also have natural resources. It's a competitive market. Everyone is trying to sell their product. Okay? So, that is why it is important actually to collect this data. You know how it works, because I have also spent time in Germany. So, there everyone is also entitled for unemployment benefit. If you are a student also, you that is why everyone wants to migrate to those countries, because that is something, right? But then you are paying towards it. It's not coming for free. Someone else is paying for it. There's a pool of money. So if someone, like insurance, how it works, right? Someone would be paying the entire life, but may not have consumed a single cent, taken the benefit from the insurance money. But someone would have consumed, although would have started the insurance maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, accident happens, they consume, right? This is a similar phenomenon, right? So now here, family structures and every, so social vulnerability, that means these are the kind of data that you need. Coming to population vulnerability, what, how many people are, for example, are under risk for a particular, let's say due to particular flood or landslides and so on. So population is straightforward, number, okay? Like I have given some example, people in flood risk, daytime, nighttime. So if you have data only, then you can do that, right? How can you have daytime, nighttime? Only when you have the data, how many people are working. Morning shift, there are also people are working night shift also in the companies and all that, right? Those kind of detailed data that you need. Okay. Physical vulnerability means structure. Physical means structure, like assets, like building. There is all those things, right? So how many buildings in flood risk? Maybe when you are doing the assessment for 10-year return period, or maybe 25-year return period, 50-year return period, 100-year return period, and so on. Okay. Another example, buildings in low landslide susceptibility zone. Buildings are in moderate landslide susceptibility zone. Buildings in high landslide susceptibility zone. I have put this example so that you can comprehend what I am trying to talk about. Okay. Now coming to the capacity. Capacity also has two components. Coping capacity. Okay. Coping capacity of the society or individual person, right? So coping capacity has two components. One is disaster preparedness, another one is awareness level. Okay. Disaster preparedness again, what? If anything happens, what is the nearest evacuation center? Evacuation centers, which one normally the government would prepare in the case of disaster? Schools. Right? Bigger, I mean those are public places. The temples. Ancient day, we used to use the temples, masjids, then all the religious places, right? Then, and also sometimes they can build temporary shelter. But temporary shelter also they build in a, maybe a school, those kind of compounds, right? So what is the distance that you are traveling? That's quite critical. Because if the area is flooded, what is the distance? How we are going to reach actually evacuation center?
Boats.
Huh?
Boats.
Yeah, and how many people can go? You know, so all those, that is the capacity and how much of resources that you have, right? Then awareness level, literacy rate. You know, so like here, cyclone, I don't think 90% of Indians, they knew the definition of cyclone until the 2014 cyclone happened, right? Anyway, it's Japanese town. Yeah, sorry, tsunami. So you're talking about tsunami, right? No one knew, not many people knew what is tsunami, right? So the information is important. You know, when I visited Banda Aceh, after the tsunami, after some time, obviously, only the entire city, I'll show you some of the photos, satellite photos. The entire city was totally destroyed. The structures were destroyed, except there is one masjid that was standing tall. Okay, so before, see how the information comes in, I'll tell you. The traditional information also play a very important role, but somehow we do not pay those information. I mean, we don't carry on those information, passing on those information accurately. Because today we are in a digital world. Unless until we see things, we don't believe in things, right? Correct? The young generation, what do you call them? Young generation? Gen Z. Gen Z. Okay, the Gen Z. You guys are Gen Z? Okay. Lucky you. Yeah. No, but they have their understanding. Like my children, they have a totally different understanding. Whether I'm a professor, whether I have knowledge, they don't give damn about it. They must believe and see. Okay, so that's Gen Z. Okay, so before the tsunami happened, the water, seawater receded is about 1.5 to 2 kilometers. Okay, so obviously it is a normal day, morning, wonderful, the sun is up there, and then there are fishing activities happening, children are playing, and all those things are happening. So when they saw there are fishes outside, you know, so people think, oh, it's an opportunity, you know. Because of that, because they didn't actually, obviously there is a time, that means the sea has receded, obviously now it's coming the next tsunami. They didn't run. Had they ran to the actually and there is a hill area, I was there, I've been there many times. At least 40-50% of the population would have died in Dhanbad, the place that was totally destroyed. Oh, it's you go today, if you still communicate with them, every house would have lost some people. And months, just fractions of second, people are just gone. Okay? So if that information, if they knew about it, that why this water has receded, okay? See? Knowledge, information. Okay, so I'm giving the examples so at least you understand that. Now, awareness, literacy obviously, and why I would say literacy, because the government also comes with a lot of awareness plans. Okay, obviously they put a lot of graphics and all that because they know that people wouldn't understand. Not many people can read. Not every state is like Kerala, right? But literacy is about 98%. Maybe Bihar, Jharkhand, maybe what? 60, 58, 60. It's very, very bad. Okay. Australia, 100%. Okay, now, so these informations are very, very important. Literacy rate, schools with awareness program. Okay, that means any programs that is being launched by the government is also very important actually to grow and promote those information actually at different stakeholders. Okay, are you understanding me? Now, let's understand one by one. I have already mentioned, so let's just quickly go through it. Physical vulnerability, economic vulnerability, social vulnerability, and environmental vulnerability. Physical vulnerability is what? The potential for physical impact on the built environment and population. So that means it's population. And the built environment means what? Structure, house, roads, all those things. Okay, clear? And again, the damage is expressed in terms of 0 to 1. Okay, 0 is not likely, 1 is potential. Yes. Okay. Now, so now you can see here, the structural engineers can also give their inputs. Building structure, how much it can resist, especially if you are dealing with seismic vulnerability assessment. Okay? Economic vulnerability, the potential impact of hazard on economic assets and process, business interruption. Okay? Secondary effects such as increased poverty and job loss, especially dealing with the economy. Okay, we are not talking about now the buildings and structure here. We are talking about if, let's say, there is an economic activity that is going in that area, if that is being now disrupted, what would be the potential loss coming from that disruption of the economic activity. Okay, got it? But for that you need to have the information, right? If it's a company, let's say TCS, should have the database, that's a TCS, or industrial area, and how many people are working there, what is the per capita, per person, all those things also you should have. Social vulnerability, the potential impact of events on groups such as the poor, single parent household, pregnant or lactating women, handicapped children, elderly, and so on. So social vulnerability is about awareness and all other type of information related to the social stuff. Okay. Environmental vulnerability, the potential impacts of events on the environment. Like what? If there is a tsunami came, there is about 3 kilometers, the seawater has intruded, and all those farming lands they have been totally damaged forever. Okay? So that's a huge impact on the environment. Alright? Apart from all other type of losses that has already happened. So I already mentioned, so based on this, especially these economist guys, they came in and they also inducted these socio-economic parameters to the vulnerability assessment. That was already done, right? Social and economic spheres are considered in defining vulnerability, coping capacity, risk and vulnerability, risk reduction measures. So we are not just talking about that the degree of loss in terms of values or in terms of people that are on risk. Also we are talking about how resilient the people are. Okay? In order to rebuild their life immediately after the aftermath of the disaster. Okay? This is what I was trying to explain. So you have coping capacity and resilience. See, some aspects are still overlapping. What is coping capacity? What is capacity that define a combination of all strength and resources available within a community or organization that can reduce the level of risk. Can be one person, a community, small community, big community, or a village. Okay? They have the ability to reduce the level of risk or the effect of a disaster. Okay? Again, capacity can be physical, institutional, social, economic needs. Okay? This is what the definition based on the United Nations. Some examples of capacity are permanent houses, ownership of land, adequate food and income sources, family and community support in terms of crisis, right? Local knowledge, good leadership and management. Let's say in a village where it is being now affected, but now let's say 80% of the population of that village, now someone or other is working overseas. So there is dollar coming in. So obviously the coping capacity is much more hard. Someone who is just depending on actually the local economic activities like doing the farming or whatever. Right? Now you try to understand in a context. Okay? Got me? Okay. Now resilience is the capacity of a system, community or society potentially exposed to hazard to adapt by resisting or changing in order to reach and maintain an acceptable level of functioning and structure. That means this is an ability to adapt so that how quickly that you can come back to your to your normalcy. Okay, that is what actually you call resilience. And the strengthening of coping capacity usually builds resilience to withstand the effect. So that means once the coping capacity is high, obviously, automatically you are strengthening your resilience as well as a society. Okay? So they are similar in a way, but one is more about like how quickly that you have the ability to bounce back. Okay? Now, try to understand from here. This is very easy to understand. Now, there are 8 stages, let's say, of a disaster that is happening, right? Pre, during, and post disaster. Pre, during, after. Okay? Now, one is the preparation stage. Before, let's say, monsoon time, we know that, okay, there is a cyclone prone area, and cyclone doesn't happen in Gujarat. Or Gujarat does, because it's a coastal area. But, well, cyclone happens only in the coastal area, so we know, right? So we know exactly these are the delineation of the cyclone, and also we have understood there is a cyclone path. Landfall in the path. As it designated. Unless unusually sometimes it goes out of that because everything is changing anyway. Right? So there is a preparation stage. Now you think the initial, so this is a normal thing. This is a normal life, business as usual, I would say. Okay? This is business as usual. This is with respect to time. Okay? And this is the performance. That means how do we perform as a person, as a society, and all that, right? So this is the business as usual. That means as we are, the life is running as usual. Preparation, that is okay, we are doing the preparation. Now, there is a event that has happened here. Okay? Understand? So this, so boring. So this is the preparation. Now this is where actually the event has happened. This is the, what I put here, this line as disrupted event that has happened. Okay? What happens? Quickly when it happens, the first response comes in from the community and also from the society and also from the institution like the government and all other institutions that is they are dealing with it. Right? You can only do it if you have the information. You can only do it if you know exactly. If you are doing this disaster management cycle, you have understood and you have already prepared. That is an early one. Otherwise, you would be just अंधेरे में घुमाने वाली बात हो जाएगी. ठीक? Right? So now the initial impact that happens here, right? Here, this is the initial impact. Then obviously it drops because it depending on the type of impact that we are talking about, it would drop. It's no more actually the normal life business as usual. Right? There is a disruption of the activities, right? It drops. And by the time of full impactment happens. Tsunami when it happens, basically, it's not just the first wave. Then there is also second wave, there is also third wave. Okay? And maybe there is an earthquake, another earthquake that has happened that has triggered something else. Okay? So until then actually that entire full impact that has not been realized, still we are in that zone. We are still responding, trying to mitigating, coping. Okay? That is where the coping ability comes in. Let's say, now the event is supposed to be lasting, let's say flood, massive flood in Brahmaputra. The event is supposed to last for a week. Now we have the resources for 3 days. How? Food, shelter, medicines, everything, that's a 3 days. So disaster. Then after 3rd day, sanitation. Sanitation is a big problem. Now you understand? Okay. So the initial impact is where happens. This is that the recovery starts. Preparation for recovery. And how all this recovery depends on a high resilient society. Okay? That means your coping capacity is extremely high and you're also resilient to this impending event that has happened and disrupted your life and activities. Okay? How long will you take actually to come back to the normalcy? It will never come back sometimes to normalcy. You visit today to Bandar, it's not the same. People carry the emotional pain. Okay? Let's say mother, just they are playing together and then 2 or 3 of the kids is gone. The bodies couldn't find. Then there is a mass burial. Right? Couldn't even find. Couldn't even honor the who and what. Right? That how? Mental thing is how to estimate. Economic, everything you can do the estimation. Right? The mental. Right? And this mental thing has become much more prominent after COVID. Otherwise, the mental well-being was not that popular thing previously. Now everyone talks about mental well-being, which is good. In Australia, in every organization, we have a day called Are You Okay? Are you okay? That means in an organization, it is important actually everyone to feel safe. Everyone should feel their mental well-being is being taken care. You know, you can't do bullying there. If you're a boss, you can't just bully. You can't ask people to work beyond certain hours. You must be fair. You must allow them enough time actually to perform the activities. Otherwise, you would be fired. Okay, and that is what actually the mental well-being, right? Sometimes what happens is that in the name of this doing quick on, and there is a pressure that you carry. That's why all these suicides are happening. Mentally, you can drown. Like yesterday, 3 days ago, I was reading an article somewhere. No. There is an article somewhere. There is the pressure that was coming. So, a lot of cases, especially in yeah, too many of the information that I've read. So the thing is, this is a serious thing, and we don't normally speak out, right? Our Indian culture, we don't speak out. So mostly we just say that and take it, because there is a stake there. You want a job there, only sorts of income, whatever you don't want to do changes and all that. People explore that conditions, right? They know. You know what is the job? Maternal leave. The maternal leave can run into 15 months. And also given to the paternal leave. That means it's not just the job of the mother to take care of the child. So that means the couple. Okay, so the father also can allow. He can also apply for 6 months leave. It's totally culturally different, right? You can't bully. You can't just say someone, okay, I need this done. This to be done in 1 hour time. Okay, you can't do that. You must allow. That must be fair play. Fair play. You understand? Fair play. That means everyone should be given the right kind of opportunity and allowing the right time. Okay. And the communication has to be totally well established. Like, sadly to say, in India, I have not worked in India, so I wouldn't know because I have left when I was very young, when I was studying. So, but here I have noticed, like, in the office atmosphere, that you pass comments based on someone's performance and all that. That is also considered as bullying. So, if you go and complain to the HR is bound actually to take an action, investigation at least. And if it is affecting your mental health, definitely there will be an action. You can go and even report against your boss, regardless whoever it is. Because boss is not everything, this is just a chair. That's why you see there, we don't actually idolize people. The Prime Minister is just a Prime Minister, it's a job. He takes a train. You can just walk, you can see me sometimes. Okay? There are positive, but here obviously you can't do it because there is a threat. You know, imagine if no zebra security or whatsoever security. There is a threat. No, people don't care. One of the ex-prime minister, he was slapped. Like इधर जो दिल्ली का chief minister को जो हुआ, तो गया आगे. You know, people don't idolize. You see, Smith, such a huge modern day Aussie cricketer, he just retired like that. Isn't it? Yes, so an attitude have written and then that's it. But look how much we idolize. Okay? Imagine thinking that Virat Kohli is retired. It's like whole country will go into mourning. That's a problem. That's a serious problem. That even I'm telling you, that's a serious problem. Because we idolize people so much. Right? So, same thing, when Sachin retired, well, but then again Virat came, there will be another X, Y, Z will come. And the business will just go as usual. Nothing stops. But we idolize so much to be like a god, close to God. The next day, we'll bring them down, put them actually patal lok mein unko डाल देते हैं. है कि नहीं? जला लो, ये कर लो, बकवास है, ऐसा है, वैसा है. Then we forget everything. पता चलेगा कल क्या होने वाला है. Right? That is wrong. They take it just as a sport. And that is why they are fearless. Because they are not bogged down with these expectations that they have to carry. It's just a sport. And this resilience, the mind game, has been built from the childhood, in the school. You go and see that in the school how they play. You know, someone gets out, right? This is walking, that's all. No one talks. No one would come and give you a piece of, advice and, you would be mad. If someone already has performed badly, obviously who wants to get out? Right? Who wants to throw him over? No one. He's trying his best. But यहाँ पे क्या करेंगे? जो पान के दुकान में जो ज़्यादा करते हैं ना, वो तो साला माहिर है खेलने में. है कि नहीं? True or not? In what context I'm trying to tell this? I'm trying to tell this in the resilience perspective. So why Virat can take other people, take on, right? It's that resilience that he has built. And the current Indian team somehow, because of the IPL, they have learned this. Building resilience. सोचो 20 साल पहले ये क्रिकेटर जाते थे ऐसे फिर आउट हो जाते चले जाते थे, but now you see they can go another country and they can वहाँ पे भी जाके actually they show power. Mental game. Right? That is what I am referring to, the resilience. Okay? You cannot quantify it. You hear me? Coping with the loss. Everyone coping ability as a person would be different. Let's say कोई गुजर गया हमारा, जान पहचान वाला कोई भी. So how individual persons actually deal with that loss differently. Some of them they go into depression. Some of them they bounce back. Right? Yeah. उनकी जिंदगी पूरी चली जाती है ऐसे ही. Some people quickly bounce back. Okay, and this is all depend on, there is science. It's not actually whatever resilience that a person develops, it comes the way he has been nurtured during the childhood. How he has been treated. Okay, in the school, in that society that he or she has been brought up. Right? Indians हम लोग कतराते हैं नाम में. पहले तो अंग्रेज बोलने के लिए भी कतराते. Right? Why? उनको हमेशा ऐसा लगता था कि English is a big thing to talk. बाबू लोग से तो English. Right? Right? And we used to feel shy speaking in our own language. जबकि your language is much more complex than English. Yeah? Grammatically you see. Right or wrong? Yes. It's a very simple language. तुम सोचो. He, she. That's all. Right? हमारा हिंदी में क्या बोलते हैं? Definition of that particular person. चचेरा मामा, मामा का साला. In they don't say that. He's like that, like father, mother, just like that. But for us, every relationship there is a name to it. They don't have either uncle or auntie. Right? मासी को भी auntie. मासी अगर मम्मी से बड़ी भी है वो भी मासी auntie, right? So this all these things comes from actually the way you have been brought up. The fear of failure, fear of doing a mistake. हम क्यों नहीं पूछते हैं? गलती ना हो जाए. Okay? Remember, we will only learn from the mistakes, not from the success. कुछ हो गया तो हो गया, फिर उसको दोबारा तुम थोड़ी ना करो. बट जब नहीं होता है उसके ऊपर तुम ध्यान दो. स्किल डेवलपमेंट वही होती है. Right? Okay, coming back to this. Understood this? Yes. Okay, so I was telling you this story so that you understand the resilience, the coping capacity from a different perspective. different persons. Some people are so fearless, you know, like they change job, they don't care because they're so confident that today I'm jobless, you know, month time, they stay chill about it. कुछ अनबन हो गया ऑफिस में छोड़ तो जाने निकल because they're so confident. 3 दिन पहले I was reading an article. There is one Indian IT person. She went through a divorce, okay, about 2 years ago, just after the COVID. So she had only $10,000 in her account with a young kid. So obviously she got in the US, Indian. She got the custody of her child. $10,000, all she had to manage her family. She dared to change her job. Then joined a new job. Within 2 weeks actually, the salary was already doubled, okay? Then one fine day she just got a letter that you have been sacked. Jump. Within 2 years now she's earning more than $1 million per month. Resilience, you see the resilience. आधे लोग तो आ ही जाएंगे पैक करके, मम्मी कहाँ गई, right? So resilience comes actually the way childhood, how you have been treated during your childhood. ना give up करने का, लड़े रहने का, डट के पड़े रहने का, you know, those are the what you call the resilience. Okay? Now this is over. Now let's try to understand it a bit more. Again, in terms of community resilience, you see, resilience, this is what we call the resilience triangle. Quality of infrastructure and how quickly actually we can bounce back, right? It has dropped here, but then how fast actually, if you have resources, you can bounce back. If you have dollar, you can bounce back, right? If you have technology, you can bounce back, right? See, again, the ecosystem resilience as well. You know, in the Western countries, when they build a new tunnel, there is a very detailed economic ecosystem assessment that we do. That means, are we disrupting the ecosystem there? Otherwise, we are not going to pass. Regardless whether it is $5 billion cheaper, they would divert. If you go to Scandinavian countries, Europe, when you drive sometimes, let's say they would have cut actually a forest. So they would make sure that the part of the forest is also connected. Because otherwise what happens? The animals and the entire ecosystem would be totally disturbed. This part is gone that side, this part is gone this side. આજકલ in India we are doing that. Previously, who cares? लोगों को जाने के लिए पहले मिल जाए वही बड़ी बात, right? Okay, so these things are also very important. And remember, ecosystem plays a very important role for balancing everything. Now, in this regard, so there is something called two aspects to it. One is vulnerability, one is external aspect, another one is internal aspect. External aspect is the exposure, the external side of the vulnerability. Okay, like social inequalities, access control by upper classes, you know, then population dynamics, capacities to manage the environment. It relates to vulnerability to the incapacity of people to obtain or manage assets by legitimate economic means and so on. आज भी इंडिया में कई ऐसे विलेजेस है जहाँ पे लोगों के पास उनका खुद का घर है जनरेशन वाइज, but they don't have the paper for it. This is a sentence I'm quoting what Prime Minister said 2 days ago. There is a summit in Delhi, right? Republic India Summit. True. How can you do that? In order to do that, you must have the digitizing, right? पहले तो तुमको पता चले कहाँ है, किधर है, कौन सी पार्सल है, right? That is why you see in India, you villages घर को देके बैंक से तुम पैसे नहीं ले सकते for any kind of activities, so economic activities. City में कर सकते, right? say you have a piece of land in the city, and you tell the bank that I would like to build, let's say, 4-story buildings. Depending on how much they can give you, they can give you 2 crore, 3 crore, whatever. Right? Loan. Why? Because of this. Okay? So all these, like the social inequalities and all that also plays. And the internal side is it to capacity to anticipate, cope with, resist, to recover from the impact on hazard. Okay? I have already mentioned it. Okay? Now, so all these 4 types of vulnerability we know is multi-sectoral, and when we are dealing with multi-sectoral, obviously we need GIS to manage the data. Okay? All physical, social and everything, we need GIS to build the data set. Vulnerability maps, they are prepared by physical vulnerability map, social vulnerability map, economic vulnerability map, environmental vulnerability map, individually, right? Then you combine them actually to come with total or final vulnerability map. And this can be done based on the spatial multi-criteria analysis. Okay? Understanding? And obviously, remember, vulnerability always depends on the stakeholder involvement, community involvement. What you feel sitting in your office and assigning some values doesn't matter. It's all about also the community input is also very important. They are knowledge, they are information, they are feedback. Okay. How to express vulnerability? There are many ways that you could express vulnerability. Some they express in terms of vulnerability indices or indices. Indian way of pronunciation is indices. Americans say indices. Okay? So, vulnerability indices, that means hazard intensity and vulnerability. That's how. Vulnerability varies between 0 to 1, right? Hazard intensity, depending on what kind of hazard intensity that we are talking about, and they put a graph. That is how they express. Also, sometimes they put in a tabular format. Okay? Vulnerability curve, this like curves like this also sometimes they do. Okay? Again, hazard intensity and probability of the vulnerability, right? And they divide into different classes like moderate, extensive and complex. Jovi, okay? And in that curves also they have relative curves and absolute curve. That means relative curve means percentage of property value depending on how much of data that you have. Or absolute means exact amount, depending if you are very unlikely that you are going to have those kind of data set anyway. Okay? And there is also something called fragility curve, but we are not going to learn about all those things. We are going to do spatial-based assessment. Okay, 2 types of methods. Then what are the methods for measuring the vulnerability? 2 types. One is called empirical method, another one is analytical method. Empirical methods also can be of many types. One is analysis of observed damage. Okay, historical event, whatever damage that has happened. Okay, based on that you prepare the data. That is how you calculate actually the empirical based method. Expert opinion, you bring people, ask them actually to give their feedback, and you build up actually your physical vulnerability. Score assignment again based on, like normally the social guys, they always do produce about 15 pages, 20 pages of questionnaires, right? And the questionnaire they will put this very likely, unlikely. Sometimes I get confused. What is the difference between very unlikely? One time I feel that very unlikely, but the next moment I feel no, very likely. Very difficult. Okay, to quantify. Again, in what kind of mood that you are in. जल्दी में करना है, चलो सब डाल दो एक करके डाल दो. Okay, so then analytical methods is simple analytical methods. Okay, that means if you take into design criteria of the buildings, okay, like for example building, the structural assessment of the building, the resilience of the building, 2 different type of hazard, that is also can be done. Like one example, seismic load, to derive the likelihood of failure, or maybe you can use the computer-based assessment as well, right? Finite element analysis, you can do that, right? And or maybe in the earthquake you use the shake table. Shake table actually to determine that shake table and also the wind tunnels that they use as well to determine the behavior of buildings as well, the structures. Okay, the design structure. Basically design. You're not taking the whole building and doing the analysis, right? The design. Okay. Or you can use the detailed analytical methods, which is basically complex method. And it's obviously time consuming and it makes lots of data. Okay. So if you look at it, depending on the time, resources, money that you have, you can do from the simple observation-based vulnerability all the way to the detailed analysis-based vulnerability. That means you can go to the individual building level. Or sometimes if it is a 20-story building, you have the information that is a 20-story building, each outlay of the building, also you can do all those kind of. Okay. So here I have put expert opinion, simple analytical method. You love expert opinion. Okay. Now let's take a look at damage assessment tools for empirical based method. One simple example here. Here we can use the remote sensing data. Right. When an event has happened, obviously you can also do the quick estimation of the assessment data damage that has happened, provided if you have the data at that time, just after the event. Let's say your satellite passed, your temporal resolution every 1 month, and just the satellite has passed this morning, okay, and then the event has happened in the afternoon. Right? That is why I said that all the resolution that I have taught you, that's why you need to design, you need to determine that what need to be done. Okay. Rapid monitoring using video cameras also you can use. Participatory GIS approach, existing database, expert opinion. See, for example, this building was like this. It has become like this. Okay? Okay? All those things you can do. Analytical method. One example here I put the behavior of building and structure based on engineering design criteria. Like seismic load, to derive the likelihood of failure using computer-based method from geotechnical engineering. For example, shake tables, wind tunnels, as well computer simulation techniques. As I said, finite element analysis. Okay. See, here one good example here. This is the building is at 0 second. That means we have given the simulation. 0 second, the entire structure is intact. 1 second, this is seismic. Okay. After 1 second, this is still okay. 2 seconds, still okay. 3 seconds, there is a tilt here. Can you see?
Yes.
Okay. 5th second, almost collapsing. 6th second, destruction. And so. Right? So those kind of analysis that we know at least. Then based on that, if we come up with or if we follow the guidelines of the structural design, then if you are, let's say, falling under the seismic zone. Okay? So flooding also same thing. Like people have come up with in modern countries, they have come up with, especially in the coastal areas, there are certain houses they had that structure that we can float. Right? So that means that is what is called coping capacity. You are building a resilient society. परवाह नहीं, अगर हो रहा है तो होने दो. We are prepared for it. Okay. So this is computer simulation techniques, model collapse of masonry structure and all that, right? Numerical also similar. Now, but certain type of hazard, they are quite complex, right? Because geohazard is quite complex, as I mentioned. Already given you good number of lectures on that. Okay. Mass movement is what? Landslides. Terrigenous mass movement is essentially landslide. Mass movement. Movement of the masses. Okay. Again, landslide, although we have learned that okay, simple way of we can do GIS-based raster assessment, but there is a velocity. If you are talking about debris flow, right? Debris flow means what? A kilometer the debris can flow. A kilometer, a good kilometer, even longer. Okay? That also you need to estimate. Magnitude and intensity of the mass movement as well. What is the magnitude? Okay, the volume and the intensity. Type of mass movement. We say just landslide. I'll just give you some example. There are many types of classification of landslide. Then run out distance, how far? So this is just actually for the debris flow. But then there is also called rock fall. In the rock fall, there is, you have to do the distance analysis of bounce, because the rock it bounces as well. Okay, and how much material actually it is getting detached from the source rock. All those estimations need to be done in the computer-based method. So that's why lack of sometimes the information about the type of hazard and the intensity doesn't allow us actually to do a detailed vulnerability assessment as well, right? Like as I mentioned here, because you have different type of plans like fall, slide, flow, creep, spread, and so on. But nevertheless, always the vulnerability map is represented as a probability map between 0 and 1. Okay? So because of these, because we cannot estimate everything computationally, we cannot quantify everything computationally, that is the reason we rely on expert opinions. Right? Because if we have everything computationally, all data and everything, and we can measure and quantify, we will need it. Because we can analyze based on the observation of the data itself. That means data-driven approaches. Okay? So, one example of the expert-based opinion. For example, buildings. Damage intensity, they categorize into 5 types. Okay? Category 1, vulnerability is very less. That means slight non-structural damage, stability not affected, furnishing or fitting damage. Okay? Not much actually affecting actually this type of building. But building category 5, partly or totally destructed, evacuation necessary, complete reconstruction. That is how they give the weightage, okay, for different damage intensity. Okay. Road, similarly, slight damage of road, they give, let's say, less vulnerable. Destruction of road is obviously 1, 0.8 to 1. Population, moral disadvantage. Okay? Death, obviously. In any kind of resilient society, in any kind of building the coping capacity of a society, while dealing with an impending disaster, the objective should be always to have 0 death. That means no life loss. If you can do that, that means your disaster management is very successful. Money, you can rebuild your structure. But loss of lives, it cannot be replaced. Okay? This I can skip. Okay, population vulnerability, similarly you see severity there, severity level, injury level, severity 1 to severity 4. Severity 1 requiring basic medical aid without requiring hospitalization. Okay, whereas severity 4 instantly killed or injured, totally damaged, kaput. Capacitated, right? Okay. Similarly, another type, structural damage, complete collapse too. So similarly, you can, for every kind of structure, every kind of feature, socio-economic features or elements at risk, you can come up with this different intensity, and you can come up with different severity, and you can also come up with different values to it. Okay? See, that's how they estimate in GIS. Population loss estimation, severity 1, severity 2, severity, right? 4 and so on. Okay, see, there is a day and time. And you can see the color is changing, right? See here. See, with time, obviously, the severity actually is supposed to reduce as well. Because, as I mentioned, magnitude and intensity, the magnitude and the frequency, they are inversely proportional to each other. Okay? I think you all have written down now. Oh, I have taken overtaken? No, right? Yeah, we started a little late. So, everyone knows you also very restless. And, कोई भूख लग रहा है मुझे भूख लग रहा है. Yeah, it's hard. Nothing is easy in life anyway. Learning is never been easy unless until you are craving for it. Anything that you crave for it, you excel. You do excellent. Craving is not just to get a certificate. If you want, I can give today. See, don't think you are just in one of the IITs. And we have what, 23 IITs now? Or 27? I don't know. 23 IITs. And we have NIITs which is also competing with IITs. Okay? It's not going to be easy. So, if you learn something, learn by heart. Little but by heart. Jack of all trades, but master in none can be dangerous. I know this, I can do this. Give me, I'll do this. Okay? Understood this? We just wrap it up. Okay, I was mentioning that why things get complicated. Why it is not always possible actually to quantify everything. Only we do the geohazard assessment, risk assessment and vulnerability assessment. Just one simple example is landslide. Although we call landslide, but you know landslide is categorized into so many classes. That is a rotational landslide, that is a translational landslide. So one is deep seated, you can see there is a deep seated, this is shallow seated. Okay, shallow landslide. So the kind of damage, when you want to quantify and estimate, is going to be different. When you are simulating or modeling, right? So you must understand. You must understand the inventory is based on what? What type of landslide is that? Then block slide, depending on the type of material, right? So block slide, like for example, what kind of rocks would be? Fractured rocks. Okay? Basically fractured rocks can have block slides. Rockfall? Okay, you cannot actually have the mitigating measures same as when you are dealing with a rockfall or maybe a translational landslide. In the rockfall, what do? They put netting. Net. Do you put net actually in a landslide? No. You mitigate the slope. You modify the slope. Okay? Or you put the geotechnical measures actually. Right? Rockfall. See, this is the highway. Then toppling. Topple of the rock. Debris flow. This is what I am telling you. You see kilometers. Huh? So that's how the analysis has to be done properly. Debris avalanche. You have glacier avalanche. Similar kind of assessment. Earth flows. Creek. Lateral spread. When earthquake happens, sometimes there is a lateral spread. There is a huge, in between there is what? There is a gap. Patal log jana hai. Okay? That's all. So, let's say, I know it's a very intense kind of lecture because a lot of information, but just to recall it back, nothing so much information. If you just try to decode it simply, what essentially I have spoken is the definition of vulnerability, 4 types of vulnerability, and depending on the type of data and the objective of your study, you do the assessment type. What kind of assessment also depending on that. Sometimes you can do expert-based opinion, multi-criteria-based approach, or maybe you can use heavy computation as well. Okay, 4 types of vulnerability that we have, right?
Social,
Physical, social, population, and environment, right? And each type actually we understood, and then the severity level of individual type of vulnerability that we are talking about. Severity 1 to severity, the high. Okay.
So integrating them, we can measure the composite vulnerability.
Yes. That's why I put right in the one GIS slide I had. That means all vulnerability, combine them, you call final vulnerability. If you read a paper, I don't have the access to. So if you, many of my papers, in earthquake vulnerability risk assessment, there is a very wonderful paper that was published about maybe 5-6 years ago about that. We combine all type of vulnerability for the earthquake, seismic, detailed earthquake seismic risk assessment of the Dhanbad city, the city that was totally destroyed during tsunami 2004, not 14, 2004, approximately tsunami.
Which year?
2004. No, paper. You search Biswajeet Pradhan seismic, you find.
There are lots of papers. I think
Yeah, कल भी एक publish हुआ है, सबले भी एक publish हुआ है.
we have searched in last month. There is Google Scholar like 1,100 plus papers.
But I mean, every application obviously you would find. But okay, you write to me, I'll give you, send you. But okay, many of my papers I have, 90% of my papers I have put them in ResearchGate. Okay, so if you want to have a copy of them, you can download. But many of them I cannot put them actually, make it to public because of the copyright agreement with the publisher. But I wouldn't mind to put everything in the public. Okay, but nowadays in Australia when we publish, obviously everything we have to put in the public. So yeah, this is an agreement. All the research output has to be made public because why? Ultimately, it's public money. All research we are doing, everything is all data that you are. So you cannot say that is belongs to you. Nothing belongs to you. Okay. So you can write to me, but now I think you have access to. You have access to Science Direct, right? You are in Premier Institute in India. So you can download. Yeah. If you can't find some of them, you can't find, then you can write to me. I'll provide it. And like in UTS, in Australian universities, if the publisher, because sometimes publisher doesn't allow you to put the final version of the PDF file in the public repository. So what do we do? Accepted version. That means without the logo. No. Without the logo Elsevier or Springer or Ville and all that. The accepted version. That means the final version that was accepted as a PDF file. We put it. It's a mandatory for us. Otherwise, the library will change like this. What's the point of actually generating some knowledge if the general knowledge is not being distributed? It's not being available. उसको लेके तो मरेंगे नहीं, कोई पढ़ेगा नहीं, right? स्वर्ग में या नरक में कहाँ काम आएगा? Any other question? So that's why ResearchGate you can follow, and you can if you have any. So you एक दो पेपर पढ़ोगे ना जो मैं अभी पढ़ाया हूँ. If I have time, obviously I can show you some papers, but I don't have many lectures. I think I have only 4 lectures left after this, and then some tutorials. Maybe some tutorials also we try to talk about these applications, because it's not about just learning the theory. It's also learning how to apply this theory into different domains. And if I give you some examples in a particular application, probably you can comprehend and you can understand that how we can do it in your own domain. So, any questions?
Sir, basically last year we have visited in surveyed in Sundarban, especially those areas are prone to cyclones and that's all.
Okay.
There is a integrated farming system IFS which have they developed with the help of one NGO
Okay.
called is DSCC Group. So here we saw that those households which are funded by those this NGO is less vulnerable as compared to who have developed this IFA system by their own.
Less vulnerable, obviously.
Because they have the funds and all the inputs and
Not the fund. So the science of understanding actually the risk and following the guidelines. Okay. Bhuj ka jab earthquake was, it was not a big earthquake, you know. You look at the Richter scale, it was not big, but the destruction was very high. Why? I visited. Many earthquakes I visited after that. Chamoli ke baad mein gaya tha, because I was in IIT Kanpur. So immediately when I remember that evening, when the hall 5, हम लोग बैठ के actually बातें कर रहे थे. Then suddenly I realized that something is shaking. The building started shaking. Next thing actually the earthquake is something. It was massive earthquake, right? The next day morning, we left with the vehicle, IIT vehicle. So me, professor, and then another 2 of my colleagues. So about 4 or 5 of us, and then our lab assistant. We all drove down all the way to Chamoli. We spent about 2 weeks. Okay, and still when we were there also we had some aftershocks we used to experience. Okay, that means we went all the way to Rudra, the entire area. So in what context I was telling? So the thing is, the damage doesn't happen because of just the intensity of the hazard or magnitude of the hazard. It happens because your resilience, your coping capacity is poor. Your structure is poor. Okay. भुज में जाओ, कच्छ, उधर क्या था? Not even पक्का हाउस. You know जो अपना जो ब्लॉक होता है, उसको stone, masonry को, but उसमें actually they don't put even cement properly. Stone chips को खड़ा करके बनाते हैं. And वो तो थोड़ा सा शेक करेगा तो गिरेगा ना, right? Damaged people die because of that. And building structures actually, is there an organization? Now yes. पहले कौन चेक करता था? पहले तो बिल्डिंग बनाओ या फिर ब्रिज बनाओ, 5 साल के बाद वो गायब. अभी भी पेपर में सिर्फ होता है एक्चुअली रोड. I'm not talking about the highways, certain roads. Right? So that is the problem. It's not because of the earthquake. Those kind of earthquake is Chununu earthquake. You know? Yeah. If you tell this earthquake, share your experience with Japanese. 4.5. और हमारा हर रोज होता रहता है 3, 4, 5 होता रहता है. Right? Or you go to Taiwan. Because that's the ring of fire. Okay? So our death toll and also our damages are very high. When I say our means, is because of that. Because we don't follow the exact guidelines and we do not build actually the essential structures that could be helped.
because if those households developed by their own, they have the more land holdings as compared to those households funded by this NGO. But they are more resilient.
I spent 15 years in Malaysia, so I can share you also some examples in Malaysia. वहाँ पे, if you own house, own land, right? If you want to, let's say, extend your kitchen, तुम्हारा land है तो थोड़ी ना कि तुम कुछ भी करो. You got to get the approval from the council. Australia also said, Australia, you cannot cut a tree in your compound. नहीं कह सकते मेरा बाप का है और मैं कुछ भी कर सकता हूँ. Really, I'm telling you the truth. If there is a tree, let's say, and the trees are tagged actually as a heritage, you can't touch it. If you want to trim it, you got to go through the council. Council send actually their own people. You pay the council. ऐसा नहीं किसी को बुला के एक्चुअली कट कर दिया होगा ना. Okay? Malaysia, same thing. Anything, let's say in your own compound, if you want to extend your roof, extend your kitchen, whatsoever, first council. You have to design, architect, sign, go, apply. They would actually review. Or if you are building another structure, again the whole foundation, everything you have to provide that. ऐसा नहीं कि तुम 4 तला बना के बैठ गए उधर, बाजू वाला का 1 तला है, ऐसा नहीं होता. Why this is important? Now you have to think why it is important. It is important because this is for you, good. Whether actually your structure is good enough or not. पता चला 3-4 तला बना के बैठ गए रात को सब. Right? That is the reason. So the law plays an important role. I'll tell you a very simple thing. How law creates your good city. Once, ये खत्म हो गया भैया.